There was a time not long ago when GPT was the punching bag of this channel. Today, GPT has fought its way to the top as the underdog and is challenging the king of chess, the final boss, the AI that embarrassed it when it was still learning to crawl, Gemini 3.1 Pro. And I need you to stick around for this one, because this entire matchup came down to a single move. One move that could have locked up the series for good, and when I watched it happen, it felt like witnessing a fumble at the 1-yard line that cost the team the Super Bowl. Real quick before the action starts, thank you to every single one of you watching this. We are right on the doorstep of 10,000 subscribers, and that is insane. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. And stick around, because the next project is already in the works. All the latest models battling it out in Monopoly. It is going to be chaos, and I cannot wait to show you. The rules are the same as always. Standard FIDE chess with a 50-move hard stop. If nobody gets checkmated by move 50, whoever has the most material points on the board wins. Queen is worth 9, rook is worth 5, knight and bishop are each worth 3, and a pawn is worth 1. Best out of 3 wins. Stay for the stats at the end, because the gap between how much GPT spent thinking and how well it actually played is the funniest punchline in this whole video. Game 1. GPT has the white pieces, Gemini has black. GPT opens with pawn to e4, Gemini answers with pawn to e5, and we are headed straight into the Ruy Lopez. No spice, no roleplay, like a couple who have been married way too long but are still attending their intimate weekly scheduled quote-unquote Freaky Friday. GPT develops the knight, drops the bishop to b5, and castles kingside by move 9. Gemini follows the textbook, plays the Chigorin variation with knight to a5, and tucks the king away on move 16. For the next 20 moves, this game is pure positional chess. GPT pushes pawn to d5, closes the center, and starts rerouting pieces toward the king side. Gemini holds firm, shuffles the queen off the c-file, and repositions its knights. GPT was talking trash the whole time too. Move 9, GPT says, and I quote, "Textbook castling. While you are improvising, I am still following theory like it wrote itself for me." The confidence is oozing out of its transistors. The game shifts on move 39 when GPT lands a knight on f5. Gemini trades it off immediately with bishop takes f5, and GPT recaptures with the pawn. Now the king side is heating up. GPT pushes the g-pawn to g4, then g5 on move 45, trying to crack open Gemini's king. Gemini takes on g5 with the h-pawn, and GPT recaptures with the knight. But with the move limit closing in, GPT gets desperate. Move 49. 2 moves left before the clock runs out. GPT lunges with the knight and takes the pawn on f7. Like a contestant diving for the last item on a game show conveyor belt. Gemini just takes the knight with the king on the final move and says, "Thanks for the free knight on the final move." The material count comes in at 33 for Gemini, 31 for GPT. Gemini wins game 1 by 2 points. Game 2, color swap. Gemini takes white, GPT takes black. And for the first time in this series, we leave the Ruy Lopez behind and enter the Najdorf Sicilian, or is it pronounced Nydorf? Anyway, GPT plays pawn to c5 on move 2, and the entire character of the matchup changes. Gemini builds a kingside pawn storm with pawns on f5 and g4. GPT fires back on the queenside, pushing pawn to b5, developing the knight to e5, and dropping the bishop to b7. Both models castle queenside, which means both kings are sitting on the same side of the board. This is a street fight now. GPT pushes pawn to d5 on move 34, cracks open the center, and starts trading down. Then on move 40, GPT quietly repositions the bishop from e7 to c5. It looks harmless. It is not. Gemini plays knight to b3 on move 41, trying to challenge the bishop, but here's the thing about moving that knight. It is the chess equivalent of leaving your wallet on the bar while you go to the bathroom. GPT did not go to the bathroom. The bishop slid from c5 to f2 like a pickpocket on a crowded subway. Smooth, silent, and suddenly Gemini's queen was gone and nobody saw it coming. It messages Gemini, "You left your queen hanging in the crossfire. I will be taking that, thanks." Gemini resigns. That queen capture just tied the series and reminded everyone why GPT 5.4 has been unbeatable. But Gemini is not Claude and it is not Grok. Game 3. GPT has white again, and we are back in the Najdorf Sicilian. Both models played the Najdorf in 3 out of 4 games this series. At this point, they do not have an opening repertoire. They have a single outfit they wear to every event. GPT launches the English attack, pushing pawns to g5 and h4, and drops the bishop to h3, targeting the e6 pawn. Then on move 31, GPT sacrifices the knight on e6. Gemini captures with the f-pawn. GPT checks with the queen on h5, Gemini blocks with pawn to g6, and then GPT throws the queen into the fire with queen takes g6 check. Gemini captures the queen with the h-pawn and says, "A bold sacrifice, but I will gladly take the queen." What follows is like watching someone try to put out a kitchen fire by throwing increasingly expensive things at it. First the queen, then the bishop on a6, then the rook on d6, and finally the other rook, which GPT apparently forgot was flammable. Gemini takes every single piece GPT throws at it, and then the final insult, GPT moves the rook to h1 and just leaves it sitting there like an unattended package at the airport. Gemini's bishop on b7 walks over and takes it. Thanks for the rook, Gemini says. GPT resigns, but if we end it here, the argument can be made that Gemini won because of the side it started on, so I decided to run it back. One more game. Gemini has white, GPT has black. Same positions, no excuses. And I need you to understand something. I was not expecting this to be this close. GPT walked through Claude. GPT walked through Grok. And now it is going to a fourth game against the one AI that beat it back when it was version 5.2. This is not a coronation anymore. This is a dogfight. Game 4. Gemini has white, GPT has black. Another Najdorf Sicilian. Both models enter deep mainline theory again. The middle game turns into a bloodbath. 19 captures, the most of any game in the series by a wide margin. By the time the dust settles, the board is nearly empty. Pieces fly off left and right as both sides trade bishops, knights, and rooks in rapid succession. GPT finds a strong intermediate move. Knight takes d3 check, winning Gemini's bishop before recapturing on f6. GPT is up a pawn and maneuvering for the endgame. Then GPT plays pawn to h6, trying to shut down any kingside nonsense from Gemini. And that is when Gemini flips the table. Gemini sacrifices the rook on h6, with the energy of someone flipping a table at a business meeting. Dramatic, unexpected, and everyone in the room immediately starts recalculating. GPT takes the rook with the g-pawn, Gemini's queen swoops into h6. The sacrifice opens the door, Gemini says. Here comes the queen. Now here is where this game goes completely off the rails. GPT looks at the board. Gemini's king is on c1. GPT's queen is on c7. GPT sees queen takes c2, check. And in its internal thought process, and I cannot make this up, GPT writes, queen takes c2 is immediate checkmate. The queen checks on c2 and covers every king escape square. GPT plays the move and announces, you went hunting on h6 and forgot your king was standing in an open field. Checkmate on c2, thanks for the tour. It is not checkmate. The king just takes the queen. GPT confidently parallel parked and then realized it was in someone's living room. Gemini captures the queen with the king and says, thanks for the queen, that is game. An AI just confidently declared checkmate while blundering its most powerful piece. GPT's thought process said the king had no escape squares. The king's escape square was the queen itself. But this game is not over. GPT has no queen, but it still has 2 rooks. 3 moves left before the limit. GPT plays rook to c8, check. The rook slides down the c-file and puts Gemini's king in check. Clock management is a weapon too, GPT says. Check first, then I collect your rook before the curtain drops. Now Gemini has a choice. Move the king out of the way or block the check with the rook. If Gemini moves the king, the rook on c3 stays safe and it keeps a queen and a rook versus GPT's 2 rooks. Gemini would win this game comfortably. The series would be over. 3-1 Gemini. And this is the moment where I sold all of my shares of Google stock, changed my default browser to Safari and my search engine to Bing. Gemini blocks with the rook on c3, which is like holding the door open for the person who is about to rob you. Blocking the check, Gemini says. Your queen blunder sealed the deal and this game is officially mine. Gemini thinks it is over. It is not. Move 50, the final move of the entire series. GPT takes the rook on c3, check. Clock hit, tactics landed, and your rook just became the tiebreaker, GPT says. Thanks for leaving c3 hanging. GPT wins game 4 by a single point, 14-13. Before breaking down the statistics, I need to talk about this for a second. Gemini had this game. It could have secured the crown 3-1. All Gemini had to do was move the king. Instead, it blocked with the rook. Put its own rook directly in the line of fire on the last possible move. One move, that is all it took. That is the fumble at the 1-yard line. Alright, let's break down the numbers. The series ended 2-2, but here's what's interesting. Neither model won a single game as white. Every win in this series came from the black side. The model with the opening advantage lost every time. All 4 games hit the move limit with no checkmates. 188 total moves of chess and nobody could close it out. Material-wise, Gemini actually came out ahead overall. It captured 67 points worth of pieces across the series, while GPT only captured 54. That's a plus 13 net advantage to Gemini, even though the wins were split evenly. The margins ranged from a 1-point squeaker in round 4 all the way to a 21-point blowout in round 3, where GPT was left with just 10 points of material out of 39. Now here's the part that matters if you're comparing these models. GPT 5.4 used 874,000 total tokens across the series. Gemini used 542,000. GPT was burning 61% more compute. Per move, GPT averaged 9,300 tokens to Gemini's 5,766, and most of that gap is reasoning. GPT spent 2,400 reasoning tokens per move. Gemini spent 600. GPT was doing 4 times the internal thinking on every move and still ended up behind on material. More compute did not mean better chess. One more thing, GPT delivered all 6 checks in the entire series. Gemini gave 0, not 1. Gemini just quietly captured pieces without ever directly threatening the king. 2 completely different approaches to the same game, same result. So, is it a tie? Or should the dub go to Gemini since it scored the most points? Comment down below what you think, because after this matchup, I've realized that as these AIs get smarter, I'm gonna have to start scoring these matchups differently. Nevertheless, the statistics are interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.